As many of you are aware, Rabbi Weinberg and I, about 5 years ago, had this crazy idea to highlight a famous chef and invite them to join us at Anshe Torah to have them cook their favorite dishes, but alter them to be kosher. Now we are in our 4th year, and we are blessed that we've had many wonderful chefs participate in this program. In fact, last year's event around this time was one of the final gatherings we had right before COVID impacted our lives. As I started planning for this year's event, tonight's chef was the first one who popped in my mind. I remembered seeing her on Top Chef, and when I learned that she was Jewish, I began rooting for her to win the entire competition. She finished runner-up by serving her now famous matzo ball soup. And thankfully, when I first reached out to her about the opportunity, and in the first conversation, she was equally as excited and said, "It's going to be Purim. How about we add Hamantaschen to the menu?" Chef Sara Bradley hails from Kentucky and is the chef and proprietor at Freight House, a unique Southern-inspired restaurant and bourbon bar located in Paducah, Kentucky. Chef Sara grew up surrounded by strawberry fields and a pit barbecue in Paducah, eating elaborate meals with her family every night. Sara's Jewish mother and Appalachian father exposed her to her wonderful culinary upbringing. She devoted her skill set under the tutelage of Michelin star chefs John Fraser at Dovetail in New York City, as well as David Posey and Paul Cahan of Blackbird in Chicago, before opting to return to her roots, to indulge in the flavors of the Ohio Valley and Western Kentucky. Inspired by her upbringing in her own family's kitchen, Sara's mission is to bring fresh local ingredients from the community to the community, while working to define the flavor of the New South. At Freight House, she aims to bring regional ingredients to her dishes by sourcing the majority of her products from farmers within a day's drive, while working within the community to help educate it on how to employ farm-to-table practices in their own kitchens. Whether she's cooking at the James Beard House on a barbecue pit or for her traditional Sunday family meal, mixing the flavors of her rich agricultural community and keeping with traditional recipes is a task she takes pride in tackling. Chef Sara, I want to welcome you to Anshe Torah and thank you for joining us this evening. We are excited to learn from you and to taste your wonderful recipes. I'll, in a moment, turn it over to our chef for the rest of the evening, but I will say that as through the course of the evening, if you have questions, please put them in the chat to Robin Feldman or myself, and we'll make sure that we have a chance to ask the chef all of the questions throughout the course of our evening together. So welcome, Chef Sara. We're glad to have you.
Hello, you guys. I am so excited to be here. I'm so glad that we are thawing out both in Texas and in Paducah. Yeah, so I was super excited when the rabbi reached out to me. I thought this seems like such a fun event. I probably had a pretty significantly different upbringing than most of you guys. So I was raised in Paducah. At one point, Paducah had an enormous Jewish population. You know, about 30% of the city at one point was Jewish. A lot of the Jewish people that settled here were bourbon distillers. Now our congregation is about 75 people. Our Reformed congregation is about 75 people strong. So very different, but very similar in the fact that food was the major part of my upbringing. I think that can be said for most Jewish families, is that food is the celebration and it's at every table. I'm so glad to have you guys here. I think Rabbi mentioned earlier, or I was mentioned earlier, that if you have any questions, you guys, these don't have to be just about what we're cooking tonight. If you have like tried to cook something, you know, if your matzo balls always turn out like rocks, which I know there are probably a couple of you guys out there that always get those gray matzo balls, we can talk about that. So anything you guys have questions for, just put them in the chat and we'll have plenty of time to go over them. I know we changed the program up a little bit because of the supply chain and being able to get everything, but it actually made it quite a bit better because I'm going to be able to show you guys a lot more things. So yeah, I say we get started. Can someone, is Daniel on here, or can somebody tell me really quick, did you guys give them Hamantaschen dough, or do they have the ingredients to make the dough?
Everyone has the Hamantaschen dough, the brisket, and the barbecue sauce with the pickles.
Perfect. So I'm just going to show you guys really quick. We're going to get started. We're going to jump right in because there's some stuff we want to get working in the oven. So I want to show you guys really quick. So there's like a couple different dough recipes. I have it all lined up back here. So I just want to show you guys how I made my dough so that if you want to make yours later on, you're going to all get a package and you're all going to get a recording of how to do everything. So just want to show you how to do it in case you're not familiar. So I'm starting out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I've got a teaspoon of kosher salt. And I think it's really interesting. You know, I just have never cooked with iodized salt. Somebody will have to tell me if iodized salt is the same as kosher salt. I know that if you're using iodized salt in a recipe, as opposed to kosher salt, you always want to cut that in half the amount of iodized if you're not using kosher. Baking powder. So that's going to be our leavener. It's going to give our dough like a little bit of lift and a little bit of puff. So I'm going to close that up, turn this on. I've got 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. So on this right here, I have a dough hook. So it replicates your big finger and it's turning everything. So I'm going to start with my oil in there. And I want to make sure that that gets completely incorporated. And you guys can see in this cake cam right here, I am mixing. You can see I've still got the outsides. So you want to make sure everything gets incorporated. And this is a really good thing to talk about anytime you're baking. And I think that this is always a fun thing to talk about when you're talking about Purim compared to Passover and gluten development compared to leavening. You want to develop gluten in something like this. You want those strands of gluten to hold everything together. So you really want to mix it. And that's the same thing like when you're making challah. You want everything to mix together. If you're making a cake or if you're making something that you want to be really flaky, like a savory, so this is a savory Hamantaschen dough. If you're making a sweet Hamantaschen dough, you don't want to overmix it. So what you're going to do is you're going to overdevelop the gluten and it's going to be really tough. But right here for a savory one, we need it to be more bread-like. So we mix it up good. And once it gets incorporated, I'm going to do 1/2 cup of water. Has anybody, I would love to hear, you can unmute yourself. Has anybody ever had brisket Hamantaschen before? Nobody?
Nope.
We've got not one person? All right, so this.
We have a quick question. Someone wants to know if they could knead the dough by hand.
You can. So what you're going to do is, and I thought about doing that to show you. So what you'll do is you're going to start with a well. So you're going to mix your dry ingredients, put the oil in the middle first, and kind of stir your finger into the middle. So you slowly incorporate that. And then once you have a dough ball with the oil, I would put it in a bowl and work the water in slowly. Because if not, it's going to be a big mess. But yeah, you can totally, I can actually show you how to do it right here. So what I've got right now is still a pretty, what I would call shaggy dough. I think that's the word we would use for it. So it's not that perfect. So after you get the water incorporated and the oil incorporated to this point, and I love having a wooden board, and you can see that on one of the cameras. It's going to be a pretty wet dough. Just going to take a little bit of flour and sprinkle that down and start to knead your dough together. And a good trick, you guys, for if you ever are cooking at home and you are not wanting to like have all this dough that's stuck on your hands and you can't get it off. Little trick is just to sprinkle a little flour in your hands and rub your hands together. And it all comes right off, perfectly clean hands. So that's the trick. So you want to, what I'm doing here is I'm taking it and I'm folding it over in half, bringing it back.
Can you tell us what kind of brand of kosher salt that you use?
I use Diamond Crystal. So can somebody weigh in on that? Because I don't actually know. Is iodized salt even kosher to use? Is all salt kosher?
Your comment.
Isn't kosher salt the #1 ingredient that most kosher households don't have?
Really?
I heard that somewhere. I don't know.
That would be interesting. I tell you what, I have given up completely cooking with iodized salt. So iodized salt, they started using iodized salt back like in wartime. People weren't getting enough iodine and they were getting goiters. So they started putting iodine in everything. And now there's a lot of research that shows that iodized salt is not that great for you because there's too much iodine in our diets now and it kind of affects people's thyroids in certain ways. So we don't ever use any iodine or iodized salt. The other thing that's really interesting about iodized salt is that if you picture, you know, a bucket of sand and a bucket of rocks, there's significantly more sand in that bucket of sand than there is in that bucket of rocks. And the grain on kosher salt is much larger, so you can use less salt, you know, when you're actually seasoning. So that kosher salt is going to be super concentrated, tons of salt in like 1 teaspoon. Other than kosher salt in 1 teaspoon, it's not as much. In restaurants, we like to use it, and we're really specific about the type that we use. Like we only use Diamond Crystal because other kosher salts feel different. And if you're using salt all day long, you get accustomed to that, picking it up and seasoning. So it's really important that we use that. If you are going to cook along, and if you don't have your oven on to 350, crank that bad boy up. So I'm going to throw this in the fridge. And I have a couple options. So I thought of 2 things. One, somebody said, yeah, so if you use iodized salt, you want to cut that in half. So this recipe, all my recipes are calling for kosher salt. But if you use iodized, you always want to cut a recipe in half. I haven't seen a recipe written in a really long time that calls for iodized salt. So, I'm going to put this in the fridge. My dog is following me around back here, just waiting for me to drop something. And I'm going to go ahead and get my brisket filling too. I think that it's important to remember that when you're working with Hamantaschen, the colder the filling, the better and easier it is to work with. So you can see in my little bowl right here, I have got some brisket. I just picked mine up when I was on the way home. And, you know, it's probably not as good as y'all's Texas brisket, but it's pretty good. I mean, Texas is known for brisket. Where I am, pork butt and pork shoulder are king. And I'm just going to crumble it with my hands. You don't really need to chop it or anything. If if it's ice cold and you're having trouble, then you can just kind of cut it up. A lot of times I'll take that fat off the top just because a lot of fat in that Hamantaschen can kind of make it want to fall apart. And at the restaurant, we do all kinds of cool Hamantaschen. We'll do, and just so you guys know, my restaurant is not kosher. It's not even kosher style. But we get really playful with some of the stuff that we do. So we do like a brisket Hamantaschen that has an everything cream cheese filling, and that's a big hit. People around there don't know that they're even really Hamantaschen. They just think they're eating triangular pastries. So, I'm just gonna crumble up this, and you guys probably have this done already. Once I get it all crumbled up, I will mix in a little bit of my onion. So your recipe, when you get your recipes, it calls for a cup of onion. This is your preference. So if you love, So the recipe for the brisket. So I think somebody's asking for the recipe for the brisket. You guys got that brisket from the local kosher barbecue joint. So they were gracious enough to supply that for it. And, you know, whenever I'm cooking, I'm always looking for ways to support local businesses. And so I think it's really nice to be able to support someone like that. This is like smoked barbecued brisket. So whether I have it or whether you got it from, I think it's called pallet or plate. Is that right?
Kosher palate, yes.
Yeah, kosher palate. And I looked at their menu. It looks amazing. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this cumin seed barbecue sauce. And the reason that I chose a cumin seed barbecue sauce is when I was doing lots of research on food that we're going to eat around Purim, I saw that a lot of whole grains, a lot of seeds, a lot of nuts, a lot of things like that. So I wanted to use a barbecue sauce that had some whole seeds in it. So this barbecue sauce in the recipe, it has some cracked cumin seeds. So that way you get a little bit of that. Normally, any other time of the year, I'd grind those up really fine so that I didn't taste them. But around this time of year, I like them to be kind of in there. So I want it to be kind of moist. You guys can see it's kind of coated, but it's not so coated that it's going to melt out. And that's the thing, same thing you want if you're making like a pastry filling or a pie filling for this one. You want it to be juicy, but not so wet that when you cook, it just falls apart. I'm going to pop that in the fridge. And I'll come back in a few minutes and we'll roll those up. So everybody should make sure they have their fridge on or their oven on to 350. Can you guys see my face and my hands? Do thumbs up if you can. I'm not seeing any thumbs up.
Yes, we can. If you can make it a little lower, we can see most of your hands.
Here. You should be able to see. Yeah. All right. If you want, you can, if you want to see my face and my hands at the same time, you can spotlight one, or I think, yeah, there you go. All right, we got it. Cool. So we've got the Hamantaschen dough made. We've got the brisket made. Got our cumin barbecue sauce in there. And then I made some bread and butter pickles earlier that we're going to serve with that. But the next thing that I want to show you guys how to do is do a chicken. So for my family, roast chicken was amazing. I had a couple different instances growing up where we didn't have like roast chicken or roast turkey. And it was one time we went to my Aunt Evie's house in Greenville, Kentucky, which is where my mother's from. And my grandfather was from Prussia and all his siblings, and we went for Thanksgiving. And my brother and sister and I were so excited. All the kids from all over the country came. And we thought, we're gonna have turkey because it's Thanksgiving. And we had beef tongue, boiled beef tongue. And we were like, my brother and sister and I were like, we refused to ever go back to Aunt Evie's house for Thanksgiving ever again. Because it was so out of the sorts for us to have boiled beef tongue. I still, to this day, have trouble with boiled beef tongue. But I want to show you guys a great trick for cooking chicken or cooking. You can use this for chicken. You can use this for turkey. So the recipe that you got calls for you to brine a chicken. So I know that a lot of times kosher meat is already salted. I love brining chicken. What it does, or brining meat at all, it kind of works like by osmosis. You're going to pull the moisture in, and then you're going to hold it in there. So you put something in salt, and it immediately starts to leach liquid. So you put something in this salt water, sweet tea brine, and all of the moisture starts to come out of the meat. But if it sits there for long enough, osmosis works, and it pulls all of the moisture back in. It also pulls in the flavor of the tea, which is a little bitter, the flavor of the sugar, which is kind of sweet. It helps with the browning of the bird when you're cooking it. So brining your chicken is an amazing idea. This is not something that I put in the recipe, but this is a little trick that I wanted to show you guys. So right here, I have got some grapefruits, some oranges, there's thyme, there's parsley, there's mint. I essentially just grabbed all the herbs and the citrus that I had in my fridge, and I cut those up. So this is the good trick for cooking chicken. So I have here a whole chicken, and I'm going to move this so that you guys can see this way, straight, let's see, straight on. So I've got the wings here facing you guys. I'm gonna flip this guy over. So now the little tail feathers facing me, where his neck would be is facing you. And with a nice sharp pair of scissors, I'm just gonna scoot back just a little bit. I'm gonna start on one side of the tail feather and I'm gonna snip all the way up. So when you guys get your chicken next week, this is what will have happened to it in the back end. So I've gone all the way up one side. Now I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'll flip it around so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna go from the neck all the way down to the tailbone on the other side of the backbone. And you guys, this is one of the most basic butchering techniques you'll learn. So now you've got this bird, you can open it right up, and then you come in right here. I'm gonna center it so you guys can see. Whoops. So now I've got what would have been where the legs are connected here. I've opened it up. You wanna clip right where the wishbone is, and then just use your hands and push this open. And that's called spatchcocking. So that is a very basic butchering technique to spatchcock a chicken. So what you've done is you've taken a bird that would normally take an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you can cook this guy at 425 in about, if it's a 4-pound bird. Somebody said, can I lower my camera? So you should be able to see. Are they not able to see both of my cameras? It's okay if they can't. I can probably lower it. That better?
It works. We just can't see your face. So,
Yeah. So I'll move it back here in a second. So, can you see me now? All right. So I tell you what I'll do. I'll leave this guy up here. And I'll bring this guy up so you can see me talking. So now I've got this bird that I split open. So you can go from taking a bird that takes, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours. If you're right at about a 4-pound bird, you can roast a whole chicken in about, if you roast a whole pound bird, a 4-pound bird, it takes about 35 minutes at 425 degrees. So what I do with this bird now, so it's been brining in sweet tea, so it has this really nice, beautiful sweet flavor. That sweet tea also helps the skin get kind of crispy. I'm going to throw it into this bowl right here. A little bit of oil all over, inside and out. Don't forget, don't ever worry. Don't forget to season the inside of your bird, especially if you're roasting it whole. You always want to make sure that you season the inside of your bird. And I've got some homemade za'atar. I love, this was one of my favorite things when I went to Israel. It was a spice that I had never seen before, and it was just on everything. And I came home so excited about it. I was like in my 20s, and I remember bringing like huge amounts of za'atar home and putting it on everything. I think it's probably my favorite on scrambled eggs. Use a little bit of scrambled eggs, and you stir in a little bit of sour cream right at the end. So we've got this bird now, and I'm going to lay this bad boy right on top of that citrus. So what this citrus is going to do is it's going to keep the bird off of the tray so it can steam. So the citrus will steam underneath and impart all kinds of flavor. You'll get those herb flavors, you'll get those citrus flavors, but it also holds it off the tray enough so that air can circulate around it, and that's what helps it cook even faster. I feel like I want a little bit more za'atar on there. And if you're not familiar with za'atar, it's like a Mediterranean Israeli spice. It's become super popular in kitchens, like especially in professional kitchens recently. Bird, right in the oven. So while I put that in the oven, I think this is a cool time to talk about what happens when you put stuff in the oven. So if you have an oven, like this is your oven, here's the bottom. This is normally where your heating element is. No matter if it's electric or if it's gas, you've got this heating element right here. This is your top. So heat rises. So you're going to get, if you cook on the bottom, you're going to get a more direct heat. So you're going to get something that gets really brown on the top. If you cook on the top where that heat is rising, you're going to get something that gets really brown and crispy on top. So if you don't have a convection oven and you want to get even browning, you always want to cook in the middle of your oven. If you do have a convection oven, and a convection oven just means there's a fan in there that circulates it around. Get out of here, doggy. The fan that circulates it around, then you don't have to be so concerned about where you cook in your oven, but it's a good thing to always remember where you're putting stuff is going to affect the outcome. So for that chicken, I'm going to start in the middle of the oven. I have it on convection, that's good. And then if I feel like I've cooked it for 35, 40 minutes and it hasn't gotten brown enough, then I'll take it and I'll move it to the top rack, and that will help the chicken skin get really good and crispy. So that's what we're looking for. So, any questions? You can ask me anything. I'm good.
Sara, we do have a few questions that came
Sure,
in.
yeah.
Let me scroll back up. How does
That looks like a chef's kitchen right there.
how does a sea salt compare to kosher salt? And if you want to move up your camera, I think you switched the prep one and your regular one back, so now I can't see it.
Awesome.
There we go.
So I think that so for me, so I've got some really good salt like right here. I love this salt. My mother would kill me if you saw me opening this with my teeth. So this is a pretty great salt. This is called flake salt. And I want to show you guys that is one piece of salt. One piece. So you can see like how big these pieces of salt are. And these come from dehydrated, so yeah, sea salt is, somebody said flake salt, like Malden salt, exactly. So the thing that's really interesting about salt is that salt is not fat soluble. So what that means is if you were to take a bunch of salt and sprinkle it into oil, it would not dissolve. It would just sit there. Salt is water soluble. So it will dissolve in water, but it will not dissolve in fat. So if you're wanting to make like a really nice finishing butter, so maybe we would always do, like, I know this sounds absolutely horrible. Don't judge me, okay? We would take matzah and spread butter on it and then sprinkle salt and sugar. It was like I don't know, it's like something we grew up eating. It's delicious. Just a little bit of salt, mostly sugar. But I was always so surprised that the salt and the sugar remained and kept their texture. That's because they're not fat soluble. So the thing about using sea salt or flake salt compared to kosher salt is that those are significantly more expensive. The thing about that is that normally flake salt or sea salt, if you taste it, it has a lot more like minerality to it. So it has, I would say, like more nuances of flavor other than just salt. So since they are so expensive, I often use them just to finish things. So if I've grilled a steak and I've seasoned it during the grilling process, it's going to have this nice kind of coating and layer of fat. So you can season with just a little bit of flake salt at the end and you'll keep that texture because it's not going to dissolve right into the meat. Matzah with salt and sugar is the best. Thank you, whoever said that. I love you. I feel like we're closer to each other right now. Great. What else for you, Queen Esther? I have to say, you look like a different person now that you don't have that hair on.
Thank you. I don't, bangs were not working for me. I had to get rid of them. One of the questions at the top that came in is, what bourbon do you cook with? And is it different than the one you drink?
So I think that this applies for bourbon, wine, anything. I never would cook with something that I wouldn't drink. A lot of times when you're cooking with bourbon or you're cooking with wine, you're concentrating the flavor, especially when you're cooking with wine and you deglaze with something with wine and you reduce it down to the French word would be called au sec, which means almost dry. You're concentrating those flavors. So if you use a really bad wine, that's what you're going to get. I'll tell you, I have a memory of going to Israel, and we were there for Sukkot one year, and they brought out this wine, and it's called, I think it's like Hag, almost like H-A-G is the way you say it. And I was with my cousins, and we all kept calling it like hag wine because it was just the worst wine we had ever tasted. And so I wouldn't suggest you cook with what we call hag wine. You want to use something that's really good. And there are really beautiful kosher wines, and we have a lot on our menu that are coming out of Israel, coming out of like, especially the Golan Heights. So there's really great stuff. Bourbon wise, I don't think there's any bourbon that's not worth drinking. I mean, especially if you're going to get like a Kentucky straight bourbon, but I love to cook with a high proof bourbon. So I would suggest like Old Granddad 100. If you want to keep it in the family, you can buy Heaven Hill products. They're owned by a nice Jewish family. So, and they make a couple bourbons that they actually stamp as kosher. So I think Heaven Hill bourbon is they have beautiful products. So I don't think you'll ever go wrong there. All right, so we made our dough. I want to show you guys how to get your dressing ready and assembled. So I have the idea for this next dish came from the fact it's called up in the South, we call it killed lettuce. So killed lettuce is essentially when you take lettuce that is like a nice fresh lettuce, or you take greens, pulp greens, collard greens, anything like that, and you kill them with hot bacon fat. Okay, so we know that cannot be, that's not Jewish. That's not kosher. So I came up with an idea for how do we get that bacony, smoky, maple, sweet flavor, but without having to use bacon. So mushrooms. So mushrooms for me are the ultimate sneak if I want to make something taste like meat. They have a really umami flavor. So I've got some shiitake mushrooms right there. And one of the things that's interesting about your flavor palette is you have sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. So that's kind of what the American palate has always based off of. If you look at Asian cuisine, they have an extra one called umami, and that umami is the savory flavor. It's what you get from soy sauce. It's what you get from mushrooms. It's what you get from grilling a steak. Anything fermented is going to give you that umami flavor. So taking that always is an easy way to sneak your mind into thinking you're getting something meaty, but you're not. So what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to pulse these up. So I want them to be really chopped up. And you guys, this is an amazing way to do things. Like if you want to make mushroom bolognese, like if you want to serve a dairy meal, you can cut mushrooms up a little coarser than like this and cook them just like meat. So you can make them into your spaghetti sauce. You can make them all kinds of different ways. It's a great way to sneak stuff in. So what I've done here, so I just have my mushrooms right here. And next I'm going to add, and don't forget, you will get all of these ingredients. So you don't have to worry that you're maybe not seeing them all right away. But I'm going to add olive oil in. I'm going to add my soy sauce. We talked about looking for things that have like a very umami flavor. And remember that soy sauce is salty. So you want to treat it like a seasoning. I'm going to add a little bit of smoked paprika. And a little bit of chopped garlic. all of those go in along with half a cup of water. And chop those up some more. So this is what mine looks like inside. I've really made this like paste. It's got that brown kind of caramel color that you would expect if you were getting bacon or something similar to that. It's got the saltiness that you would expect from a cured meat. You put a little bit of olive oil in there, so it's got a little bit of fat. I'm actually going to add just another tablespoon or so. So we've got all of those flavors that actually would work there, but we've done it Kashrut. So we are going to, and I don't know if you guys ever go, if you ever have gone to a steakhouse or something like that, and you see that salad dressing that has, or that salad that has wilted spinach, hard-boiled eggs, red onion, bacon vinaigrette. We're taking all of those, we're taking those two dishes, which are never available kosher, and we're going to redo it so that it is. So, very classic dish. So that is what I've got, this really kind of mushy mix. And I'm going to throw this right on the stove. So you have a couple options. If you want to make this and walk away and forget it, you can just put it in your oven and let it cook on low. But if you want to make it happen a little bit faster, you can cook it right on your stove top. So I am cooking mine right on my stove top. Oh, you're not seeing. I'm cooking mine right on the stove top, about medium high heat, and it'll go for about 20 minutes, and then it'll be done. And we'll be able to turn that into a dressing. You guys got any questions about that one before I move on? Nothing?
There was a question, are mushrooms another option to use with Brussels sprouts?
So I tell you what, I love mushrooms and Brussels sprouts together. Brussels sprouts, so a lot of the flavor that you think of when you think of cabbage, they are, so cabbage is just, Brussels sprouts are a little tiny cabbage, and cabbage and mushrooms, they love each other. I think that you could definitely use Brussels sprouts if you wanted. I don't know, Brussels sprouts don't seem to have as much water in them as mushrooms. But was the question like, can you substitute Brussels sprouts for mushrooms?
It was my question. I was just curious because Brussels sprouts are always cooked with like a bacon sauce whenever you go out. So since you were explaining it as like mushrooms could be a substitute for bacon, can you use it as like a sauce on Brussels sprouts? Yeah. I had no idea how to ask that question.
Yeah, 100%. So this sauce that you're going to see is like the perfect thing to sub out for anything. And when you taste it, I know that probably not a lot of you guys out there have, I don't know, maybe you have tasted bacon. I've eaten a lot of bacon in my life. I did not grow up eating kosher, but this is a really good replica for that. And they'd be really good. And I'll tell you, a really great way to cook Brussels sprouts is to, so like, if this is your saute pan right here. So let's see. You want to click back over to me real quick, or can everybody see this? Yeah, so this is your saute pan right here. So cut your Brussels sprouts in half and then put a little bit of oil in the bottom of your pan. So cut your Brussels sprouts in half, put a little bit of oil in the bottom of your pan, and then lay your Brussels sprouts in the pan cut side down. So your pan is like cold, it's over here hanging out, you put a little oil, you put all your Brussels sprouts down, and then take your pan and move it over to the heat. Turn the heat on like a medium high, and you'll see those Brussels sprouts, they'll go from like that real kind of like opaque color, they'll start to get a little translucent, they'll cook all the way through. And when you dump them out, they will be the most beautifully caramelized Brussels sprouts on the bottom, and they'll be soft all the way through. Because what it is that cut side is down, and so it's steaming up inside of it. So they cook really fast. It's a beautiful way to do it. And this sauce would be absolutely amazing on there. This sauce is good. I mean, we also use this sauce to like slice beef very thinly and marinate it. So this is a great sauce for lots and lots of things. So I'm just keeping it stirred up. I just want to cook it really nice and slow. All right, so chicken's in. Oh my God. I wish I could smell a vision. I wish that was a real thing. Is anybody here making cocktails today? Is anyone going to do cocktails along with us? Did anybody go out and buy this stuff?
There's a lot of people, I think, who have purchased the ingredients for your recipes.
Well, let's do one cocktail so everybody's not sitting there just like hanging out, waiting for something to do. So we'll make one first, and then we'll go back and we'll do some other stuff. So what's really great about these cocktails, you guys, is that these are all made right in the glass. So you don't need shakers, you don't need spoons, you don't need any of that stuff. You can build these right in the glass. I think we start with the bourbon one because that's what I like to drink. So we're going to start. So I'll let everybody gather their stuff for their old fashioned. So it's an old fashioned unveiling. That's what I named this cocktail. I was trying to explain to my guys at work, my employees, the story of like the unveiling, and they said, so does that mean that that's like why everybody always looks at, like lifts the veil of the bride and looks at them? And I was like, yeah. And they said, so we're like doing Jewish stuff at our weddings? And I said, yeah, you are. And they were very surprised. I guess that a lot of times people just think that that is a tradition that's, you know, they don't realize how long that tradition has been in our culture and how long it's been around. And so I think it was kind of a fun thing for them to learn. All right, so we have got, so this cocktail right here is the classic cocktail. What we're gonna start with is a Demerara sugar cube. So, and I'll get close in here so you guys can see while I build. So this is a Demerara sugar cube. It's like a rough cut sugar cube. If you couldn't find one of these, you can always use a little brown sugar, or you can use a white sugar cube. And if you don't have that, a little honey works nicely, anything that's kind of sweet. So I'm gonna start with my sugar cube right there. And then I just dumped these out into small containers so I could show you guys the exact amount. So I've got orange bitters. So I like to use the Angostura orange bitters. And that is a pretty significant amount. So if you're using them out of a shaker, you probably need like 3 or 4 good shakes. If you're using them out of a vial, you probably need like 1 full vial. And what I like to do is pour that right on my sugar cube. So if you can see the bottom of my glass, there's a little bit of liquid, you know, there's a good amount in there. And that Demerara sugar cube will start to just kind of soften that up. So the orange bitters will start to soften that up. Next, a Meyer Lemon. So what I love about a Meyer Lemon, do you guys get Meyer Lemons down in Texas? Yeah, probably, yeah. So what I love about a Meyer Lemon is it's like if an orange and a lemon had a baby, it would be a Meyer Lemon. So I'll do a big slice of a Meyer Lemon. And the other really cool thing about Meyer Lemons is you can eat the peel. They don't go to waste. If you couldn't find a Meyer Lemon, you can use it in orange or lemon, no worries. So I've got about a 1/4 inch thick. I'm gonna put that right on top of my sugar cube. Good old trusty wooden spoon. If you have a muddler, you are cooler than I, but this is my muddler. This is what I always use. It's broken on the end, so I don't really cook with it anymore, but you just want to get that sugar cube and crush it up. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm just crushing the flesh of the lemon. I'm not actually crushing the outside. If you start to crush the pith of the lemon, you're going to get a lot of a lot of bitter in there. And I just want to get some of that sweet, some of that acid, not looking for any bitters. And I'm just gonna let you guys see what's going on here. So I've got this cooking. It's just be turning this really nice, thick paste. Yummy. And if you ever feel like maybe that's a little too dry, or if you're ever cooking something on the stove and you feel like it's a little too dry, here's the trick. Add water. You can always evaporate water. You can always cook water out. Don't add a bunch of salt in the beginning of your cooking process if you're not sure, because if you evaporate all that liquid out, you will condense that salt. You can't get rid of salt. Once it's in there, it's in there. So if you feel like something is getting a little dry, you just add a little water to it. So after that goes in, I have see. What temp is the stove when you're reducing the mushroom dressing? It's about like medium right now. So if you wanted to, you could definitely cook it. I'm actually going to turn it down to low. If you wanted to, you could take that pot and put tin foil over and put it in the oven with the chicken and let it cook for like 30, 45 minutes. And that would be a much more even cooking process. But you just want enough to where you're cooking the moisture out of the mushrooms. You really want to concentrate those flavors. A huge ice cube. If you don't have one of these ice cube trays, you should ask for one for Hanukkah. I love like a nice big ice cube. So we're going to put that right on top of our stuff. If you don't have a big ice cube, just use some of your small ice cubes. You'll be totally fine. And then I told you guys either rye or whiskey. Rye is going to be a lot spicier. Bourbon is going to be sweeter. So an easy way to remember when you're dealing with alcohols is that sweet is wheat. So a wheated bourbon is going to be much sweeter. So sweet equals wheat and rye equals spice. So a rye whiskey is going to be much spicier and a wheated bourbon is going to be much sweeter. So, So I like that spice. So I'm going to go with rye, and I have 2.5 ounces. And it's a big cocktail, but we're celebrating. Today's that one. I mean, I guess a lot of Jewish holidays we do some drinking, but I feel like this is the one where we're really living for it. Now I'm just using my muddler, and I'm going right around the outside. And I like to stir it until I put my hand on the outside and the outside of the glass feels chilled. If you can see what I'm doing here, and this means this is good for if you're stirring a cocktail, even if you have like a metal spoon, or if you don't have a metal spoon and you're using something like this. What I'm not doing is I'm not trying to stir the middle. I'm using the outside of the cup and I'm going around the outside of the cup. So I'm not rubbing the ice that much. I'm creating less friction with the ice, which means that I'm not melting the ice. I'm just cooling the drink. Cheers. It's so good. It's bitter, it's sweet, it's boozy. That's what we need on Purim. So I hope this keeps everybody warm. Is it warm down there now? Have you guys like come out of the freezing?
It was 70 degrees last weekend.
It's crazy. It's bizarre. It makes no sense. None whatsoever. We had over 12 inches here, but we're in Paducah, we're used to like one really good snow a season. So we get one really huge snow. The restaurant was closed for 3 days. We had pipes bursting. It was this whole mess. And now it's like 70 degrees here too. So no sense. So next I want to make the skillet cake for you guys. The last thing we're going to do is the Hamantaschen. I want to show you guys how to make everything that's on the recipes so that you can go back and do those. So the skillet cake is a very classic Southern thing. Essentially what you're doing is you're making a cake that has a little bit of cornmeal in it in a cast iron skillet. It's super easy because it's just one, it's like one thing. You don't have to get your mixer out. You don't have to do anything like that. So there is when you get these recipes, there's a couple options. If you're going to use butter flavored Crisco or margarine like that, you're going to have to cream your butter and your sugar together first. But if you're not using those, then you can just do straight like what I'm doing. And I like to use vegetable oil. I'm not a huge fan of like butter flavored things. I like it to either be butter or oil, not butter flavor though. I'm gonna bring everything up for you guys. And this is a dish that we love in Kentucky. Normally it's made with sour cream or creme fraiche, and normally it has a little bit of butter. And so we've tweaked this recipe to make it for you guys. But in the process of doing it, we realized that this is much better than the way with butter. It's just so moist. So what I've got to start is I'm going to use vegetable oil. So I'm going to start with my vegetable oil right in the middle of my bowl. Let's see if I can get up close so you guys can see that. So vegetable oil right in the middle of my bowl. Next, I'm going to add my sugar. So it calls for 1/3 a cup of sugar. Put that right in. And remember that sugar and salt are not oil soluble. So that's why you can never get them to mix together completely. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start to stir those together. I just want to make sure they're incorporated. Now, what's really interesting about cooking and baking like this is we're going to get everything in. And one of the last things we're going to do is add our dry ingredients. And that's because you remember when I was talking about making the Hamantaschen dough and really trying to develop a lot of gluten? This is the exact opposite of what we want to do. We do not want to develop gluten. We want it to have a really flaky crumb. Next, I'm going to add an egg in there. And you guys, I'll show you another trick. Always crack your eggs on a flat surface. So when you crack your eggs on a flat surface, you get a nice even break. Crack them on the side of the bowl, and you push you'll push the shells in, and you're definitely more likely to get eggshell to break off. So do it on a flat surface. You'll thank me later. So next I've got sorghum. So I found out that it's very hard to find sorghum, which I thought it might be easy. I found out that it's very hard to find sorghum in Texas. So I think a really great substitute for sorghum is molasses. But what you want to do is use half the amount because the molasses is significantly stronger. Sorghum is a really cool vegetable. It is indigenous to Kentucky, and it's just like a sugar cane. So you grow it, you cut it off. So it's indigenous to a couple places. The South, specifically kind of Kentucky and the Appalachian region, and then a lot of places in Africa have red sorghum. We have brown or white sorghum. So they cut it off, they let it dry, and then they take it and juice it, and they cook it down just the same way they would maple syrup. So it starts out as this clear liquid, they cook it over an open fire, and it ends up this beautiful brown goodness. So it's very thick. Has anybody ever had sorghum before? Do you have any sorghum people out there? Not a one? Oh my goodness. Would sorghum have to be certified since it's like just a vegetable agricultural product? That's a question I don't know the answer to.
If it's processed, it would have to be, but it should not be hard to because it's an agricultural product.
That's what I thought. I mean, they're still cooking it. And I'll tell you what, most of the people that are making sorghum are doing it in their backyard. So there's probably not a rabbi there, like watching the process, making sure that it's all good. So what I've done is I've mixed my sorghum in. So we've got that. So we're going to set this over to the side. in a different bowl, I'm just going to mix all of my ingredients. So I've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I've got, let's see, about, is it salt or sugar? There we go. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Always make sure that when you're cooking with desserts, you add a little bit of salt. There's something so delicious about salty and sweet, and you don't actually need it to taste salty. But just adding a tiny bit of salt in there really, really sets it off. So now I'm doing about 1/2 teaspoon of clove, about a teaspoon of ginger, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. And don't forget, if you don't have these, let's see, in South Africa, yeah, oh, I've had sorghum beer. It's delicious. Sorghum is really cool because you can use the top of the grain. So it grows in a big stalk and then it sprouts on top. And they use the grain a lot for cattle feed. Can use it for all kinds of stuff. The stalks themselves, they can make rope like they would with hemp. So you can utilize the whole entire plant. And it's just, I mean, you can make liquor from it if you want. I've heard of people making like sorghum the way they would rum. I've never had the chance to try it. Hopefully one of these days I will. So I'm going to take my dry ingredients. And you guys, I'm going to mix them into my wet. And remember, like I said, this is the time where we don't want to create a lot of gluten. So once these go in, this is my folding technique. You just want to stir everything together. And this is going to be very similar to like a ginger cake or a molasses cake. And we picked this dish for Purim because it has pecans in it. It has dried fruit, has lots of yummy stuff, has whole grains in it. We're using cornmeal, so I guess it's not a whole grain, but it definitely is a coarser ground grain. So once you get it about like this, so it's almost together, that's when you're going to add a cup of water. So you want to add that water in. Normally, if you were making cornbread or something like that, that is when you'd add your buttermilk. So if you're making this as a, as a dairy dish, you can substitute the water for buttermilk or for milk, or you can leave it water. And it's delicious. And now we're slowly working it in. Remember, we don't want to overmix it, so we're just going to do it nice and slow until everything is incorporated. And if it has lumps in it, you can see that mine have some lumps in it. That's totally okay. So that's good. I can see there's still a little bit parts like that maybe don't look fully incorporated, and you can see that there are some lumps in there. That's no problem. Those will perfectly melt out. So back here on the stove, nope, you can do a 1-to-1 swap. So somebody said if you use buttermilk, you can do a 1-to-1 swap. So what I did over here back on the stove is I did I'll put this right here so you guys can see. I've got a cast iron skillet, which if you're not from the South, it's time to get yourself a nice cast iron skillet. I've heard that not everybody that is around there is from the South. It's time to get yourself one. So hot skillet. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in there, or you can use your vegetable oil, your butter if you decide to switch it over. And if you want to do butter, if you're somebody that asks about doing it for buttermilk, you can also use butter there too. So I turned this on so it's really nice and hot. And what you want to do whenever you're cooking with something in a pan that's really good and hot is you want to make sure that when you move the pan around, you can see the oil ripple. So if you just move it around and it just floats straight across or it stays really thick, your pan is not hot enough. And that's a good technique for if you're cooking fish, if you're cooking steaks, if you're cooking anything. You always want to see your oil ripple. And I'm going to do it one more time so you guys, I think you might be able to get a good look this time. It almost looks like there's like waves in it. And if you don't see that, it's not hot enough. So I'm going to add half of my batter. The other thing you guys can do is you can use this base recipe, and instead of using sorghum, you could use all sugar if you wanted to, and you could use blueberries when those get in season. You can use all kinds of stuff. I'm doing apricots because we're wanting lots of dried fruits. So I'll put that in. And the reason I don't put the apricots on the top is because they have a lot of sugar in them and they will dry, they will burn. So I put those right in the middle, and then they stay really nice and chewy in the middle. So those go in. And then right on the top, and I've still got my heat on underneath there. It's on very low. I'm going to sprinkle pecans. Again, we're using whole nuts, whole seeds, all grains, and just a little bit of brown sugar. You don't need a lot, a little bit. And that goes in the oven. Oh my goodness. I wish you guys could smell this chicken. Woo. You guys want to see what it looks like so far? Can you show the prep cam? So it's getting this like really nice caramelized. I can smell like the coriander toasting. I can smell like that sesame smell. So really nice and toasty. So we've done our skillet cake. We've got our chicken. And here in a second, I'm going to show you guys a sneaky little way to make your chicken. I'm not going to show you guys the coleslaw just because it calls for you to cut up vegetables. But I am going to show you a trick to make coleslaw. So this coleslaw, this cabbage right here, is, can you use another type of pan for the cake? Yeah, you could use like a cake pan. You could use a casserole dish, like a Pyrex dish. You could use any of those. I just love using a skillet because maybe of the nostalgia of it, that it's like a skillet cake, but you could use anything. If you use a glass pan, it may take a little bit longer to cook because it takes a little bit longer for that glass to heat up. And you can get your glass warm ahead of time, but you're not going to get that browning effect. So right here, so when you get your recipes, it calls for 8 cups of cabbage. So I want you guys to know that this was 1 whole head of cabbage. So this was 8 cups. So for 8 cups, it was 2 of these packed completely full. And now it's like not even close. So what I did is I put a little bit of salt and sugar on here, not a whole bunch, maybe a tablespoon of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. And what that does is this really cool thing. So this is called curing. So what it's done is it's taken the majority of the moisture out. So I'm going to squeeze it for you guys. You can see how much liquid is just coming out of a little tiny bit. So if you ever made coleslaw before and you make the coleslaw and you're like, you taste it and you're so excited because it tastes perfect and you're like, I'm going to take this to the potluck, it's going to be the most amazing coleslaw, or you make it on Friday and you want to serve it on, like for Shabbat dinner on Saturday. And then you take the coleslaw out and there's like all of this like white, milky, or a bunch of juice at the bottom, it's because cabbage has a significant amount of water in it. And once you added that salt and sugar that was in your seasoning, you ended up pulling all of the liquid out. We talked about it with the brining, like leaching liquid. That's what salt and sugar do, is they leach. So if you add a little bit of salt and sugar ahead of time, and you do this to your cabbage, end up with, so out of that cabbage, I maybe have half a cup of water, So this isn't going to end up in my stuff later. And it works really well, especially for I feel like for Shabbat, because you get the same product. Like when you taste it on Friday and it's like seasoned and it's perfect, and then you want to eat it later on Saturday, it still will taste the same. If you don't, what we call cure your cabbage, then by the time you taste it, it's going to taste under seasoned, because you haven't taken the time to pull all of that moisture out. So now you've taken something that's perfectly seasoned and you've pulled all the moisture, all the water out of the sauce. And so now you don't have that. So I always suggest curing your cabbage beforehand. So good. And I don't know who it was that asked me about Brussels sprouts. This is my absolute favorite way. So I said Brussels sprouts and cabbage are the same thing. This is my absolute favorite way to eat cabbage. So I'm a cabbage junkie. I love it. So I will take a whole head of cabbage, and with the root like this, I'll cut big steaks of it. And you want to talk about substituting vegetables for meat? Oh my God. So I've got this big, thick piece of cabbage. I then will take salt and sugar and season both sides pretty aggressively. And when I say aggressively, I mean, like for this one side, I would probably use that much salt. So it would be really, really aggressive, because you have all of this salt that you have to cure. Then I would do the same thing with sugar. I would get a cast iron skillet or a skillet, and I would cook this. I would get it really hot. I'd put oil in there, and I would cook this till it was burnt. And when I say burnt, I mean black, you guys, like really, really black. And then just take it and set it to the side, wrap it with a little piece of foil. And when you come back, this cabbage, and you sear it that hard on both sides, this cabbage will be completely cooked, have a completely cooked texture. And you've just seared it both really hard on both sides, because the salt and the sugar pulled all the moisture out. The cabbage set in its own juices and it cured. So we call it burnt cabbage in the restaurant. It's probably one of our most requested vegan items. It's absolutely delicious, but you can't be scared. You have to really, really burn the cabbage. So for your coleslaw, do your coleslaw like that, and then mix it with your carrots, then mix it with your peppers, get all that stuff up. You'll be thankful later on that you mixed it, because it will be seasoned and it'll stay and hold much longer in the fridge. Anybody else? Any questions? Any comments? We good? Everybody down with their cocktails? All right, I'm going to show you guys how to finish this mushroom salad dressing. And then I want to show you guys how to put your salad dressing together. So, I love after I do these cooking classes, my husband comes downstairs and he helps me clean up. It's the best part of the day. He's like, "Oh, did you make me dinner?" I said, "I did. It'll be ready as soon as you help me clean up." So,
Jeff,
Where are you?
Jeff, there was a question that came in that, is it possible to add too much salt and sugar to your cure?
It is, but what's really interesting is you can, yes, it is possible to add too much salt and sugar. A lot of times if you think about like kimchi or anything like that, essentially how they're getting that is they're doing a salt and sugar, they're curing it. If you add too much and then you taste it and you're like, "Oh, it's just too salty." If you're doing the charred cabbage, it would be hard. But on your other cabbage, if you taste it and it tastes too salty, just don't season the dressing that you put on it, because you can add like an unseasoned dressing. So you could add like an unseasoned, if you want to do mustard, which is what the recipe we have, which is kind of like a a Tennessee style coleslaw that usually has bacon in it, but we've left the bacon out. Yeah, so you can put too much, but remember that all of that moisture is going to come out of the vegetable. So you're going to get rid of a bunch of that seasoning. Like if I tasted that salt water, or the water that came off of the cabbage, it would be really salty and really sweet. But, you know, if I had been pregnant, that would have been like the thing I was going for. I always wanted like really salty, sweet vegetables. So I don't know, but I feels like there's another one. Another question?
It was, you kind of answered it. It was kind of, do you add additional salt and sugar to the slaw? And it sounds like, yes, you do.
So I think that another really important thing, and I think that a lot of times when you go out to eat at restaurants and you get a meal and you're like, and for some reason it tastes so much better than it would at home, because there's a couple things that we're doing. Number one, we're seasoning at every step of the process. So we're seasoning to make sure every ingredient that goes in the plate or in the dish has been seasoned. So you don't have one thing that's not seasoned and something else that's overly seasoned, because you never, like, we're not there to tell people how to build that perfect bite. So you don't have that option. So you have to make sure everything is seasoned. The other thing we're doing is we're acid. Never forget about your acid. So when I say acid, I mean lemon juice, lime juice, red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar. Those are so important. And if you don't have, if you ever use like lemon or lime juice, never throw away the zest. The lemon and the lime have acid in them, but the actual citrus zest has oils in it that coat your palate, that make your mind think you're eating something that's really acidic, even though it might not be. So your citrus zest and citrus juice are always a way to make something really elevated. But yeah, season all the way through with your salt, and you won't have as much of a problem, you know. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this salad dressing, and then we're going to roll Hamantaschen. So I'm just putting these in. And if you have like a high-speed mixer at home, like a Vitamix or something like that, if you use that, you're going to get a much smoother dressing. So if you like your dressing to be kind of smooth, think like balsamic vinaigrette is what this is going to kind of end up looking like. If that's what you prefer, then I would go that way. Yeah, so we got that in there. And remember, to get that smoky, bacony flavor, we're using a little bit of maple syrup. And a little bit of red wine vinegar. I just talked about how important red wine vinegar is. And I'm not going to put any salt in it yet, because I want to taste it. Because, you know, I cooked it down in there and it had soy sauce and it had salt in the first process. So I want to blend this up and see how it tastes first. And you may need a little bit of water. Make it all nice and smooth. So I wish you guys could taste it. That's the worst part about doing Zoom stuff, is that you like make all this food and then you don't get to taste it. So that's it. That's as simple as it is. It has acid. It has sweetness from the maple syrup. It has smoky from the smoked paprika. It has that very like umami, rich, meaty flavor from the mushrooms. There's a little bit of salt from the soy sauce. So it really is a delicious dressing. And this, again, you guys, this doesn't have to be used just on the salad that I showed. It can be used on anything. So it's nice and smooth, creamy. Yeah. I could just eat that. If you made a really delicious soup, and this will stay in your fridge for weeks. So you made a really delicious soup and you just drizzled some of this like right in the middle, it would have all of those flavors that would really bring everything together. That is a, but I feel like the reason everybody came to the party, to the dance party, which I realized I was dancing and then I didn't have my cameras turned on. So I was kind of glad nobody got to see me dance, but is for the Hamantaschen. I'm just gonna let you guys take a peek at this. You can kind of see what's going on here. It's still jiggly in the middle. I can tell just by poking on the chicken that it's not done. I did turn my oven down to cook this chicken because I wanted to be able to cook the Hamantaschen with you guys. So normally I would cook that chicken at 425 and it would be done and out of the oven, but I've got it kind of lower so we can do Hamantaschen. So if everybody wants to grab their Hamantaschen stuff, I have a sheet tray here. My sheet trays are they're not non-stick, so I just use one of these non-stick fill packs. But I think it's a good idea to either use a non-stick or you can use a little bit of pan spray. I like to use this right here. Let's see, it's Parv. Here we go. I like to use that. If you use pan spray, I usually spray it on and then gently kind of wipe it off because the dough has oil in it. So you don't need to add a bunch of oil to it. So I'm going to let everyone get their stuff together. And then I'm going to move my camera right here so that when we fold these guys, you can be straight on and see what we're doing. Crooked, can't take it. Okay. So I'll give everybody a few minutes to grab their stuff. Anybody have any questions or anything? While you guys are grabbing your stuff, I'll tell you a cool story about an old fashioned. So it used to be, so these came about during like Prohibition time, and people were, they were calling them old fashioned because we were just drinking like regular old fashioned booze. The reason that the sugar cube went in it is because during Prohibition, the booze was bad. It was not good. The whiskey did not taste good. So people were putting sugar in it to try to make it taste better. So you used to go into these places, like these speakeasies, and everybody would have glasses of tea. So they were like little teacups with a little silver spoon where they were stirring to dissolve their sugar cube that was full of whiskey. And then when the police officers would show up, it just looked like everyone was drinking tea. So that was the whole idea behind an old fashioned and why it gets that whole sugar cube in it. Okay. So if you have a wooden surface, that's the best bet. If you don't have one, no problem. So I like to do, and I'm going to show you guys really quick. I want you to pretend that, so I have some flour here to season with, or I'm sorry, to sprinkle with. Pretend that this is salt. And if you move your hand and you're about an inch away from the ground or from the surface, look at how the salt goes just right there. It doesn't go anywhere else. Now take your hand all the way up, 12, 13, 14 inches, and move your fingers around. Look at the distribution you get. So when you see chefs and they're doing that and they're seasoning high, they're not doing it because it looks cool. They're doing it because it actually serves a purpose. It gives you much more even distribution of the salt, so you don't get these really heavy salt spots. So always season high. Take your hand all the way up. Plus just go in like this, you can season 5 hamburgers at once instead of, individually seasoning each one. So I've got my dough, and you can see my dough is pretty good and thick. It's pretty hard. A little bit of flour on top. And I'm going to start rolling. And the way to do this, and this actually might be, let's do this. Let's just do half at a time. So start rolling. We're looking to get, I think about 1/8 of an inch is the way to go. So if you feel like it's sticking to your cutting board, that's no problem. Or I'm sorry, if you feel like it's sticking to your rolling pin, no problem. Just give a little flour. If your dough is too thick, if you've ever rolled Hamantaschen and they tend to unroll on you, it's because your dough is too thick. You want to have a nice thin dough. I think that about 1/8 of an inch is the magic number. Another thing that if you've ever rolled Hamantaschen and you feel like they unfold on you or they don't stay together well, it could also be that you're overfilling them or that your filling is too liquidy. So I'm going to just cut a little piece off right here so you guys can see. That's about what I'm going for right there. So next, got that rolled out, and I'll wait till we see a lot of thumbs up. I can slow it down here if we need to. I ended up with my pastry cutter. So I really love to use, so these are my pastry cutters, which I'm realizing that I'm missing quite a few. But so if you're down in Alabama and you get a cat head biscuit, you use the biggest, fattest one. If you get a mouse ear biscuit, you use the little tiniest cutter. And it doesn't matter which size, it's the biggest cutter in your kitchen is a cat head, and the smallest cutter in your kitchen is a mouse ear. Doesn't matter if it's, the cat head could be this big, but normally it's about the size of a small cat's head. So that's an actual real thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start to press these out. And a lot of times what I see, you guys, is this dough can be pretty difficult to roll out a second time. So when you're cutting, you want to make sure that you get your pieces really close together. So you don't want to, cut one over here and cut one over here. You really want to try to get them as close as you can so that you're not wasting any dough. Now, if you do want to roll that dough out for a second time, what I would do is I would knead it all back together and then put it back in the fridge and let it rest for a little bit. What that'll do is that'll give it a chance to relax, because we have just rolled it out. We've just, we've really worked it out. I like to think that it's like a piece of, it's a person that was like hanging out and being all cool. And we came in and just rolled them out real flat. So he needs a chance to like chill out and relax. So if you want to do a second cut, you would just want to put it all back together, put it back in the fridge and let it hang out for a few minutes. Because if you tried to roll this out right now, see how when you roll it out, it just shrinks back up on you and it would be really hard to get. So you can still use it, you just got to let it sit. All right, Hamantaschen. So I've got my piece here, and I feel like mine's tightened up just a little bit. So I'm going to take about, a tablespoon or two of my brisket filling. Put it right in the middle. And I'm going to attempt, you guys, I just realized I'm going to attempt to roll these facing you, which is something that I never do. I always roll them facing myself, but I'm going to try. So the first piece comes up like this, folds over. The second piece comes up like this and folds over. So I want to show you. So right now, I've essentially made the top part of his little pointy hat. or like the peak of an A, if you can kind of see that. The next part, I want to take and bring this bottom piece up. So I'm making that little dough. One piece goes over and one piece goes under. So you have a little Hamantaschen. Oh my gosh, why is that so hard? You can see that each little corner. Okay, well, I'm really having trouble controlling my phone, sorry. You can see that each little corner, there you go, has folded over. Now what I like to do with the savory Hamantaschen, because normally you have that butter in there that helps it get really nice and brown. So I like to put them over here. And then I just use a little bit of egg wash. And I don't need a lot, just a little bit. And egg wash means just an egg with a little bit of water in it. You're just washing the dough. I like to seal those little corners, and I like to do that. And what that'll do is that'll help to give it a really nice brown color. So let's roll a couple more. So if you feel like they seize up on you, just give it a little roll. Anybody having trouble? Anybody want to show me one of their beautiful Hamantaschens?
So is it just a preference for you to do the fold over instead of the pinching method of Hamantaschen? Does that just hold it in better?
You know, I don't know. I never knew that. I mean, the pinch, I think the pinch works really well with sweet ones, but I've always done the fold. But let's try a pinch. I don't know. I feel like when the pinch, what you end up with is right here on the edge. You see, like kind of right here, you end up with this empty piece that's nothing more than kind of like just a little bit of dough. But we can cook some both and see. That one's actually very beautiful. So should the brisket sauce be mixed into the brisket when you make the Hamantaschen? Yes, so I already mixed into the Hamantaschen. I mixed a little bit of the sauce. So I mixed some of the barbecue sauce and I mixed some onion. And that onion is gonna add a little bit of moisture, and the barbecue sauce is gonna add a little bit of moisture to make sure that the brisket doesn't dry out in the oven. Now I'm curious, how many people are pinchers and how many people are folders? I gotta get on gallery view so I can check this out. All right, give me thumbs up if you're a pincher. I got give me thumbs up if you're a folder. Oh my gosh. It must be only Reformed Jews in Paducah that fold. So, but I'm like digging the pinch too, but the fold, so I always folded, and I feel like it holds everything in there a little bit better. You also, everything can kind of melt out into it, so you don't have these empty pockets of dough. Somebody said they ate their Hamantaschen earlier and they were fabulous. Did you pinch or fold, Gilda?
Chef, I appreciate it because the thing I don't like about Hamantaschen is just the extra dough. So I like, even though I'm not a folder, I like the attempt to now try to start folding. Yeah,
so I think that it works a lot with like the sweet ones, what I was saying. When you pinch it, I feel like you clamp the ends and it can only go right there, but when you fold it, it kind of can melt out and go. I don't know, I feel like when I look at traditional pictures of Hamantaschen, they're always, maybe not, I don't know. I made apricots and poppy seed ones for the guys at work today. So I can see here that my cake, see how when I push on my cake, it's still a little jiggly in the middle? that means it's not done. I want to show you guys my favorite kitchen tool. It's this right here. It's called a cake tester, but I don't use it for testing cakes. Maybe once in a while I'll use it to test cakes. Whoops. Maybe once in a while I'll use it to test cakes, but I actually use it to cook meat and to cook vegetables. So I use this part to see what the internal temperature is or to tell if something is warm. If you don't have one of these, you can unfold a paper clip and it works exactly the same and it costs about $4 less. But yeah, so I'm gonna try pinching and I'm gonna try folding, and then my husband is gonna get to tell me which one he likes the best. So, and I think that, you know, the recipe that I gave you for the savory one is a great recipe for all kinds of stuff. I really love to do like caramelized onion and feta in them. I think is absolutely delicious. You know, I think you can really, I think that Hamantaschen, to me, Hamantaschen are not something that are just like, it's very similar to matzo ball soup. Like it doesn't just, you don't eat it for just the holiday that it's thought for. You use it, you can eat it all the time. So I'm gonna do the last one. I'm gonna pop these guys in. And these take in a convection oven, they're gonna take you about 15 to 18 minutes. You just wanna make sure, and don't forget to do a little bit of egg wash if you have it. All right. So, and when these come out, I like to drizzle a little bit more of the barbecue sauce right on top, and then I like to put a slice of bread and butter pickle on top of there. So it's like a little barbecue sandwich. I saw a question come in. I'm more than happy to answer.
The question that came in is the 350 degrees for 15 minutes based on a convection or a conventional oven?
So that is based on a lot of times, so things will cook faster in a convection oven, but in that 15 to 18 minute range, you should be able, 15 minutes if you've got like a really nice high power oven, 18 to 20 minutes if it's, you know, if it's just a regular kind of like a little, you know, just like maybe electric. I think gas always cooks a little faster too. Someone asked, what is the diameter? Okay. I would say it's probably 3 inches.
That's 3 inches. They were the same size.
Yeah, 3 inches. I can tell you it is about, so this is my rocks glass right here, and it's larger than my rocks glass. So it's about the size of a really large, like big fat coffee mug. Is a good way to, I think, describe it. We're gonna make one more cocktail, and then I'll let you guys do with me what you want. So the last cocktail we're gonna make is gonna be, let's see. I'm sorry, I have to find I have so many recipes going on right now. Where there's smoke, there's Haman. And this was designed by my bartender. He said, by our bar manager, he was like, I need a good cocktail, English muffin size. Perfect, thank you, 4 inches. So he, I said, I need something for these people, these folks down in Texas. I need it to be like a tequila mezcal cocktail. And he was like, all right, I got you covered. So I'm gonna get a large ice cube out of the fridge. Set this over here to the side. And what I've got now is a little reposado tequila, a little mezcal, which is one of my favorite spirits, a little orange liqueur, a little pomegranate, and a little lime juice. So again, this one gets built right in the glass, which is really nice. So the reposado smells like college. Every time I drink tequila, I'm like, that's what it smells like. So I go right in with my reposado. So I've got an ounce and a half of reposado, and then just a half ounce of mezcal. Mezcal for me can get really, really smoky. So I'll usually use like a nice reposado or añejo or something like that, something that has a little bit of age on it, and just mix in a little bit of mezcal. So I do a half ounce of mezcal, pomegranate juice. Because we're using the seeds, we need something with seeds in it. So we're gonna use pomegranate juice. So an ounce and a half of pomegranate juice. And then like I talked about, here's where we're getting our citrus in there, our acid. So we can do a half ounce of fresh lime juice. And I think you guys, for cocktails, it's really important to always use fresh juice, and a half ounce of orange liqueur. Then I'm gonna take my ice cube and put it right in there. So the reason I always add my ice, like at the end, if I'm making a cocktail that doesn't need to be blended in the ice, is because I tend to walk away from stuff when I'm working in the restaurant, and I never want to like build the cocktail and then walk away. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a peeler. So if you ever read a recipe and it tells you to express the orange or express the lemon, express the basil, anything like that, what I want you to do is for citrus, it wants you to take a peeler and do a nice big peel. And I want you to take that and squeeze it on the top. And what it's doing is you're squeezing out all those essential oils. And then I usually rub it right around the edge. Give it a little curl. If you tells you to express an herb, like a piece of basil, it wants you to take the piece of basil and slap it and open it up, brighten it up, and get all those essential oils going. So yummy. It's just smoky enough. Now I want to make a cocktail. When I was listening to the end of the story, I want to make a cocktail about a bear for Purim. I don't know what, I mean, I guess it would be vodka. I feel like a vodka cocktail. It'd be like Russian vodka bear cocktail would be a good Purim drink. But let's see. So I want you guys to see this right here. So this chicken was in for about an hour and 10 minutes. We had the chicken up at about 425, It would have gotten much faster. But that is our za'atar rubbed sweet tea brine chicken. And what's really, really yummy to do, and you can see because these legs are just going to fall right off. That's another way that you know it's done, is they're just going to pop right off. As you take all that citrus underneath there and squeeze those bad boys. You can see how plump and swollen they are. Squeeze those guys right over your chicken right before you plate it, or put one of these on everybody's plate and then they can squeeze a little bit. And don't ever throw away that goodness in the bottom of the pan. That's the good stuff right there. Take that, squeeze your citrus juices into it, add a little herbs, drizzle that all over the chicken. Super, super yummy. And I will say, not that I'm sold yet, but my pinched Hamantaschens are coming apart. My folded Hamantaschens are staying together. Maybe it's because that was a new technique for me. I wasn't used to it. But
no, my pinched ones came apart too. And I always do pinched.
Do they always come apart, or do
mine never come apart? So they did this time.
Do you do usually, like with the sweet ones though, they stay together?
Mm-hmm.
So with the sweet ones, I think that they usually work, and that's because you have sugar in there, and the sugar caramelizes, and like you imagine, sugar gets hot and it gets sticky, so those edges hold it together. So with the sweet one, I think that the fold works better. But I also think that no matter if they're folded or falling apart, they're going to taste just as good. That's the one thing about it, you know, is that they always taste just as good. I'm loving all these beautiful kitchens. Some Andy's pinch stayed together. Such an interesting. Well, if you guys have, while we let those cook, if you guys have any questions or comments, if you have any, I mean, it doesn't even have to be about what we cooked today. Oh, somebody said they read that if you put them in the freezer for 5 minutes before baking, they won't. I mean, that makes sense. You know, that's why also, like, I've noticed that if I do like a double roll, it will definitely, they want to fall apart more. I can see part of your comment, Pam, but I can't see all of it.
They said they tried to use chicken thighs for the chicken recipe. Should they have adjusted the brine because the thighs are thinner?
Nope. So the only thing that's different for your brining time, and chicken thighs, good job on that. Chicken thighs are by far my favorite cut of the chicken. But chicken thighs are definitely, they have more meat, or more fat, they have more connective tissue. So they also get used a lot more than the breast. So they have a lot more flavor. The only thing different would be that maybe you brine your whole chicken a couple hours longer, but usually just overnight is a sufficient amount of time.
So chef, I guess it was a class in rabbinical school because I pinched and they stayed together.
Oh, there you go. Those look good. So what I would do is I would drizzle a little more sauce on them. And then I don't know if you guys got the pickles because I don't know if they could get you did. I would drizzle a little sauce right on top. And then I'd put one pickle right on top of there. These are bread and butter pickles. So the recipe is really, really easy. And you know, I just thought of, so we have a cocktail at the restaurant called Sara's Dirty Deed. It's like what I drank when we were first opening, and it's vodka and pickle juice, and would be the perfect Hamantaschen recipe. But what the pickle's doing for the Hamantaschen is it's giving it acid. So you've got fat in the dough, you've got brisket, it's super fatty, you've got all this smoke. So that acid is going to cut right through it. That looks beautiful. I can see yours. I love that I still want to call you Queen Esther because that's what it says is your name.
I forgot to change it. I took a bite. It is awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Somebody asked what was my best and worst memory on Top Chef. So, and am I still friends with Kelsey? So yes, Kelsey and I are still dear friends. We actually talked for about an hour today. I sent her kids some toys to play in the bathtub with. So we have remained really close. We were friends for about a decade before the show aired. We worked together in New York City. You know, my parents know her parents, my husband knows her husband. So it's always been really fun. I think my favorite memory was was the matzo ball soup. So if you have seen the show, we go all the way to Macau, China, and we have to use their style and their culture and their flavors of food, but cook something that has a memory for us. And my mother, they brought my mother to Macau, China, and on the top of the tallest building in Macau, in this rotating dining room, I cooked matzo ball soup for Tom Colicchio and Padma Lakshmi and all these people, and for my mother. And I got to sit down at the table and eat with them. And it was such an amazing experience. And all I could remember thinking was like, oh my God, I hope they don't cut into this matzo ball. And it is just hard as a rock in the middle. But it was perfect. I won that episode. It got me to the finale. So that was a great memory. I think the worst memory was just kind of being removed from everything. So when you're on the show, they take away your phone, they take away your computer. You don't get to read the news. You don't get to know what time it is. You don't get to listen to music. And they do that to make it a level playing field, to make sure that everyone is equal. So I am a news junkie. So without my news every morning, it was very hard for me. But some people rely on music and things like that. So that was the worst memory, was just being out of the loop of what in the world was going on out there. So, thank you, Dahlia and Kevin. I love, man, you know, they asked me to do the next season, but my little girl would have been like 3 months old whenever I left to do the All-Star season. And I just didn't have the heart to go and do it. Oh, I'm gonna say mine are done. So I've got a few each. I've got a pinch that stayed together, and I think maybe this is the last one I made, and I really pinched it together much harder. Then I've got some folds, but I love how like the brisket has enough little sugar on it that it gets these caramelized, what I would call burnt ends, which I know Texas does burnt ends better than everyone else. Yeah, so I like to take them out. I like to let them cool off just enough and then drizzle barbecue sauce on there and then put a pickle right on top. Eat it up. So we've got our chicken, we've got our, now we made a really beautiful salad dressing that you can use for so many other things. The apricot skillet cake is also out of the oven. And you can tell that it's done when you push on it, if it bounces back. If you push on it and it sinks in, it's not done, but you want it to bounce back to you. The pecans are all now really nice and toasty. And I don't have the patience. I'm gonna scoop a bite out for you guys so you guys can see. So it has this like gingerbread color to it. So it's this really nice. And I'll tell you, this also is great if you put like sweet potatoes and prunes and dates, cut the sweet potatoes up really small and roast them ahead of time. You know, it's like a little Simis cake. So you can use this recipe for a lot of things. Thank you, Rebecca. You know, actually, I'll tell you what, my favorite after the show memory, somebody said, can you use other fruits? Yes, definitely. If I was going to use some like springtime fruits, I would probably get rid of the sorghum and just use all sugar. Use blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, make like a really nice fresh berry one. Also like a cranberry walnut one. You could totally do it up for Passover and do like apples and walnuts, like your Harosis type thing, that put all of those in there. I think that that's part of what you do is you get a couple really good base recipes, and then you can tweak them with ingredients to fit the situation. And so that is what a smart cook, a smart chef does, is they get some really great stuff that always works for them. And then you start to just play with the recipes. So sorghum is maybe used a little bit more in the fall and through the winter into the early spring, but something lighter like a maple syrup would be delicious if you wanted to do this as like a brunch cake. So you have like maple syrup with fresh berries. So you can take little components in and out and switch it all up. I was going to say, so my favorite part of the show after the show was the episode that aired again with my mother. And we sang, wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. You're never alone when you say you're a Jew. And Top Chef was very adamant that you could not sing, you couldn't do anything like that, because they didn't have the rights to those songs. And I'm guessing that the producers or the editors, whoever in the back end of it, didn't know that that was like a song that was very famous at like Jewish summer camps and all these things. And so they put it on TV. And the cantor who wrote that song sent me a personal message that he was watching Top Chef one night with his family, and that my mother and I showed up on the TV singing a song, and that it was like this amazing moment. And it was so cool. Like, because we sang that song. I can't tell you how many people reached out to me and were like, I was in the other room and I heard you and your mom start singing that song, and it was so cool. It was just a lot of fun. That was a really fun moment that my mother and I get to share. So somebody said, how long does it take to film a season? So it takes 3 months. So you're gone for 8 weeks. Then you get to come home. Well, you're gone for like 7 to 8 weeks. Then you come home for a couple weeks, and then you're gone for another 2 to 3 weeks. So I was gone for a full 3 months. I spoke to my husband twice, my mother twice, and my father once in that whole period. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And it was kind of in the beginning of my husband and I, our marriage. We didn't get to take a honeymoon. So after it was over, my husband and I, along with Kelsey and her husband, we went and traveled around Vietnam for a couple weeks before we came home. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a long time. It takes a while.
Any other questions this evening?
Well, before we hang up, I wanted to let you guys know I do offer like cooking classes like this online, and I'm getting ready to post a matzo ball soup class. So it will be the matzo ball soup that I cooked on Top Chef. It's one of our most requested. We also will probably repost our fried chicken class. So for Hanukkah, we did fried chicken and spiced sweet potato latkes. It was like a whole like Southern Jewish cooking in oil, frying stuff. So we do a lot of fun stuff that has, we try to do one a month that focuses on a different Jewish holiday. Next month, we'll have Passover up. So you guys should look out. We have lots of kids classes. We have cocktail classes. We have all kinds of fun stuff, but they're really good. And they help keep my employees employed. The money goes straight to them during this time. So it's a good time.
Well, wonderful. Well, Chef, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You were wonderful through Zoom. I feel we really got to know you and spend time with you in your kitchen, not even at our shul. So how wonderful. The Hamantaschen were amazing. I can't wait to try the rest of the food next week. So those of you who ordered, we apologize for the delay, but I'm sure you understand our shipment didn't make it because of the storm. But it'll be in, and we'll now be able to cook alongside of you and stop and pause as we do it. So thank you so much, and your wealth of knowledge. I can't wait to try some of the things you shared with us outside of the recipes. And I hope everyone enjoyed the evening and celebrating Purim. So thank you so much, Chef. It was a pleasure to have you, and maybe we'll get to have you in person at Anshe Torah one day in the future.
Yes, and I would love to see pictures of everyone's food. If you want to send them to me on social media, you can send them to me on social media, and be prepared, because if you send them, I will share them. So that means the world will see them. But it's kind of fun to like let a whole bunch of people see your food. And I think it's really cool to let people know that we're out here doing, you know, cooking really cool food. So it's good. Look at that doggy. Oh my goodness.
He wanted the brisket.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't? Like, who doesn't want brisket, you know? Well, if you guys have, and if anybody runs into a question and they're not sure and they want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at chefsarabradley.com or just chef@sarabradley.com, and I will get back to you as quickly as possible and try to help you through whatever you're working on. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Again, it was a really fun evening, a really great way to celebrate Purim, and we wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll have a chance to taste bourbon and eat more food together in the future. So thank you.
yes.
Chag Purim Sameach to everyone. Let me remind everyone that tomorrow morning we'll have Minyan at 7:15 in the morning, 7:15, 15 minutes earlier, and we will read the entire Megillah tomorrow morning. So hope you can join us. And tomorrow evening we'll celebrate welcoming and Shabbat, 6:30 tomorrow evening on our Zoom. So Chag Purim Sameach to everyone. Have a great evening, and Chef, enjoy your dinner with your husband. It looks wonderful.
Bye, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.